Welcome back to Combat Sports Weekly. We continue to pay homage to the late, great Bob Foster. We'll start it off right away with introductions. Sitting to my right, Austin Killing's Corner. Welcome. Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. I spell corner with a K on purpose.
Well, I like that. I like that. Very good website, by the way, covering the local news.
Thank you.
Screen right, Ed Nunez, 6'10". When can people catch you?
Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m.
On?
Mike on the mic, 6:10 a.m.
Awesome. James Lindemuth, when can people catch you on the same station?
I do the weekly MMA and boxing segment on 610. That's Thursdays at 5:35. But again, stay tuned. First of the year, we'll have more.
Guys, we'll jump right into it. Ed, I'm going to start with you. Bob Foster, one of the greatest fighters ever out of New Mexico. Where does he rank amongst the greatest light heavyweights of all time?
Well, I just read a list and it ranked him at 7th, and I was, and I think he's definitely up there in the, Ezra Charles #1, no question about it. But look, he fought the heavyweights. He beat Vicente Rondon, Mike Quarry, Dick Tiger, one of the greatest victories in Albuquerque history. I've got him right there in the top, in my opinion, top 5.
Yeah. And you?
I think that's pretty accurate. One of his best fights besides Dick Tiger was Andy Kindle. Neither man had ever been off his feet, and Foster stopped them both.
Yeah. And the other top 3, who would you have? I mean,
Ezra Charles is #1. And then you could argue Archie Moore obviously is very strong contender. I personally think that Michael Spinks is really strong. I think he's like a light heavyweight Sonny Liston.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Yeah. James, he was 14-0-1 in light heavyweight title fights, undefeated, so he has to be among the greats.
He absolutely has to. And you mentioned some of the great fights like Corey, obviously, as both of you guys mentioned. I think what's more telling about how his legacy will continue is the way that he moved up to heavy. His success when he did move up to heavy. Now, granted, he didn't always have great success, but there was some amazing fights that he had at heavyweight. But yeah, he's got to be top 5. And granted, I guess we're all homers because from Albuquerque, but all of us are going to say he's #1 no matter what.
Yeah.
So.
Your favorite Bob Foster moment or fight, Austin?
I have to say Andy Kendall because I was at both their homes and they both passed away. I believe Kendall passed away around January.
Yeah. What was that like to be able to speak to both of them?
Phenomenal, and they both spoke highly of each other.
Yeah.
Bob Foster said that Kendall was one of his toughest fights.
Yeah.
The one he told me to hit him the hardest was Roger Rouse. From I think he lived in Idaho, and he was a brutal puncher.
Yeah. Obviously, a lot of moments to choose from. Ed, is there one that you can pinpoint for yourself?
You know what? You made me go back over his career, and I got to say, knocking out Dick Tiger. And I looked at that. Dick Tiger 5'7", Bob Foster 6'3", and the short left hook. And I looked at the celebration in the corner afterward. I watched it 3 times. Was he any less happy than Johnny Tapia or Holly Holm or any other Albuquerque great fighter? He wasn't. I was elated to watch that. Even years later, I was happy for him. And it's a shame that he didn't feel he got the recognition he deserved. That makes me kind of sad. But it was a great look back on his career, and a lot of that was because of what you sent me.
Yeah, obviously there, earlier on the show, we had his top 5 knockouts ever, so there's a lot to choose from, James. What is it for you?
And you and I are kind of in the same position that we weren't there. Like, you and I were, it was a little before our time, so it's hard to sit back and watch a video of it. But I will tell you, one of my favorite memories of Bob Foster is when Johnny would talk about him. And I, not to bring up Johnny Tapia, but Johnny had such fond things to say about Bobby Foster that you could tell from fighter to fighter there was that mutual respect. His knockouts were amazing. When he cut Ali, that's got to be on that list.
That was a monumental moment.
Right, because before that, as far as I know, Ali had never been cut before until Bob hit him.
He got cut a few times, but rare.
It was rare, yeah, and so that's up there with me. But for Johnny to talk to him in reverence like he does, or he did, then that was huge for me.
And I think the Dick Tiger moment does stand up there, just not because what it meant to him, but what it meant to the state of New Mexico and the city of Albuquerque, of course, becoming the first world champion. Right. And he essentially laid the foundation. I mean, it wasn't for several years later. It wasn't until maybe 20, 25 years later that you did see Johnny Tapia and Danny Romero just build themselves. And ultimately, that went to Holly Holm and, of course, a few years later to Austin Trout. So definitely laying that foundation for those fighters. And now that we're on that topic for you guys, where does he rank among New Mexico's greats? Taking Holly Holm's MMA career out of the equation. I'll start with you, James.
You know, I think, and we had this discussion, a colleague of mine and I, we had this discussion about what's like the biggest fight that this town has ever seen, and I still think it's Tapia and Romero. I really do. The fervor that fight created. But as far as, you know, the greatest fighter, I do think as far as boxing goes, Bobby Foster's the best that we've ever seen, and that's no disrespect to Johnny, because I love Johnny. But I do think, you know, Bob was the best fighter we've ever seen to come out of this state.
Yeah, Ed.
Defended the light heavyweight championship 14 times. I've got to say the same thing. Tapia Romero was the biggest fight we've ever seen here, and James mentioned that. Cut Ali, and I know some other people did that as well. Fought Joe Frazier, fought Ernie Terrell. So to me, it is him, and again, we've got one road named after him on South Broadway. We've got to find another way to honor this man. I don't know what we need to do, but it's got to be done. We really do.
I've said a statue outside
Let's
of
go
the
Philly style.
a statue outside of the
Statue.
pit. He defended the title in the pit, for goodness sake.
He
And if
deserves
anyone
it.
deserves that outside of it, there's two people. Jim Valvano, maybe, because, the
Right.
whole Houston
Right.
versus NC State thing. But Bob Foster, because of what he did.
They can give him a wise
during the
prize
time
if he needs
during
it,
the
you know,
time
and
he
make it
did it
happen.
also.
Yeah.
But where do you think he ranks as among New Mexico greats?
Oh, he's number one. His bitterness, I think, has a lot to do with that incident when he played basketball and they had the varsity and the JV team, and himself and Lorenzo Brown, who was his lifelong friend. They were too good for the JVs, but not good enough for the varsity, so they didn't make either team. And he, to the day he died, I think he took that with him. Bitterness.
Yeah, and we do talk about that, the lack of respect. I had a chance, as we saw earlier in the show, to speak to him last year. It may have been the last video interview that he did, and he kind of spoke to that, of how he felt that the media now and in the past disrespected him in a sort of way, or didn't give him the respect that he felt that he deserved for his town, and he definitely did. So let's hope now that we remember him, now that he's gone, that we can finally do that for him. But
Well, that's on us.
yeah, no,
We gotta
that
do it.
is on us, and I
So.
think it's for us to push it, and for everyone else who loved him and who's old enough to remember him, and not just that, people who love boxing history to be able to push as well. But gentlemen, I appreciate you coming on, for sharing some of these memories that you really enjoyed of Bob Foster, but definitely in my book also number one as far as it comes, the greatest boxers to ever come out of New Mexico.
Amen.
Make sure you guys hang tight. We'll have a new episode next week.